Hey everybody, it's time for Bean of the Week. I've got some yellow eye beans today. They look really good. I know this is a pretty easy bean to find just in the regular grocery store. I've seen the yellow eye beans in Sprouts. I've seen them in Central Market. They're probably in Walmart for all I know, but they're an easy bean to find. The yellow eye beans I'm using are from Rancho Gordo, of course. I got a bag of them recently in my last quarterly bean shipment. So I wanted to use them to make something. I see some people coming on, Les Swanson, Terry, thanks for joining. And so the yellow eye beans are, they're kind of a white bean. They're a creamy white bean and they have such a good taste. They're so really good. They're, I don't know how to describe them, but they're really creamy. So you make sure you cook them well so they have that nice creaminess. So we could eat the beans just the way they are. Like right now, I cooked these beans this morning, and we could have these beans, just a bowl of them, and this would be a great meal by itself. So we don't really have to do any more to them. However, I'm going to turn them into some kind of a soup. A yellow eye bean soup. And the inspiration for my soup was from the Rancho Gordo newsletter. So they send out this gigantic newsletter whenever you get a shipment of beans. And in it, they have recipes. And the recipes are always recipes I can't use. They're all oil-filled recipes. For example, the inspiration for today's recipe for Rustic Rancho Gordo yellow eye bean soup reprinted from the New York Times. So this recipe was in the New York Times. It calls for cooking the beans with 1/4 cup of olive oil. And then it calls for adding more olive oil, 1/4 cup of olive oil to make the soup. So this recipe for this amount of beans, which is 1 pound of beans, calls for a whole 1/2 cup of oil. We don't need that much oil. That's ridiculous. So we're not going to use any oil. We do have a lot of really great ingredients for our soup. We have some fresh rosemary. I bought it because my rosemary plant died in the freeze. Some garlic and some celery. I see Maureen O'Rear. Hi, Maureen. Claudia. I feel like I know some of you because I hear so much comments and things from you on my Facebook page. And I have a leek. I've already washed it. But you know, a leek, they come packaged like this, usually in the grocery store. And then I have a bunch of parsley, some red chili flakes, and some freshly ground salt and pepper. I have over on the other side. So I am going to get my little cart so I have something to set all my stuff on. I'm going to put this over here out of my way a little bit. And then I'm going to cut up some ingredients that are going to go in my soup. So remember, I've already got the beans made. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually make the ingredients for the soup, and then I'm going to add that to the beans. So you can kind of see this. I've got the beans over here. They're just kind of sitting on the stove. I don't really need to do anything to them now. I guess I could, you know, kind of put them on a simmer a little bit so they're going to be warm. So I'll do that. I don't want them to be, I don't want to keep cooking them because they're already cooked. But it wouldn't be bad for them to warm up because this recipe doesn't take a long time to cook. That's actually a good thing about it. It cooks really fast. So I have my pan here. It's set up so you can see me cut the ingredients. They're going to go into my skillet. I got my card a little too close to me. It's a little rickety. Excuse me. I got to move it out of the way. I hope it doesn't fall over. All right, so I'm going to turn my pan on. I've got a skillet, and my skillet today is this Calphalon. No, this is the Le Creuset skillet that my husband got me. And it's really heavy, but it cooks really nicely. So I like to use it. I keep it in here because it matches my pot. So it's a good pan. All right. I see a bunch of you are on. Margaret, hi Margaret. There's a thing called stars. If you see that on here, the stars have been enabled. That just means if you want to send stars to me, Facebook is trying to encourage people to go live. So the stars are a penny each. So if you want to do that, go right ahead. So I'm going to put a couple of ribs of celery in here. I've just got the skillet warming up. It doesn't have to have any water in it. It doesn't have to have any things in it. It can just have a hot skillet, and we're just going to cook with that. It's amazing how people are so worried about, you know, they have to have something in there or they're going to burn their food. The food won't burn. Food has a lot of water. And if you don't put anything in your skillet and you have a good skillet, and by good skillet, I mean, you know, this skillet is a non-stick skillet. It's cast iron enamel. That skillet conducts heat really well. It doesn't have any kind of artificial weird non-stick coating. I'm cutting my celery into little 1/4 inch cubes. And you can hear my pan sizzling, so I know that it's hot, but it's not too hot. So you don't want it to burn your food. Hi, Angie. So, you know, you don't have to worry about, we've got to put water or broth in our skillet. We don't have to do that. We just have a hot skillet. And if you really started looking at vegetables, vegetables have a high water content. Like this celery, you can even see that celery, if you look inside celery, it's very wet. So the water from the vegetables provides a lot of moisture to your pan. So I like it when the vegetables start to kind of caramelize and they develop their own sugars from the sugar inside the vegetable. So you don't really have to worry about doing anything. And the reason we're cooking all this in a skillet is because look at the amount of surface space in our skillet. We have a lot of surface area to cook our vegetables. Yes, we could cook them in a small pot, but what we're going to be doing is we're going to be adding our vegetables to our beans. So if you're just coming on, my beans are over here. I've got the beans. You can kind of see them here. I've cooked them already, and they're ready to go. I need to get this sachet out. I forgot to get it out. I have parsley stems inside this little cheesecloth bag. They need to come out because we're not going to use them. And then I have my 2 assistants over here that probably want to say hi. Well, maybe not. Mochi, wake up. He opened an eye. And then Taro, here's Taro. He's looking up. Are you looking up, buddy? Here he is. Look, say hi. Well, you can't hardly see him, but he's right over here. He is. Taro. He's kind of brown. He blends in with the background, but they're in here smelling the good smells of the kitchen, and they like it when I'm cooking because, you know, they're always convinced they're going to get something, even if they don't. But they like vegetables. It's so funny. Hi, Jenny Potts. Hi, Laura. Hi, Parminder. So, you know, now that I eat a lot of vegetables and fruit, my dogs like fruits and vegetables, and I look up all the time to see which ones are good, because you can't give your dogs all fruits and vegetables, like grapes are toxic. So I know which fruits and vegetables are okay for the dogs, and those are the ones I give them. And they like everything. They like strawberries, and they like, you know, cantaloupe, pineapple. So there's a lot of stuff. And then they'll eat green beans and broccoli, and it's amazing what they'll eat. So I have 2 carrots, and the carrots I buy are the ones that still have the greens. I cut them off to fit them in the drawer, but I really love the carrots with the green stems or the green tops, because they're really sweet and they taste good. Sometimes when you buy carrots, you know, the type of carrots that are already cut up in the bag, they taste so bitter. It's like they've been, who knows how long they've been in that bag, and they don't have their good taste anymore. So I kind of quit buying those carrots, and I buy only the ones that have the tops attached. I just find that they taste better. So what I'm doing is I'm cutting the carrot in half, then it lays down flat on my cutting board, And then I can cut it into strips, pile up the strips over here. Once I've got all my strips piled up, then I can cut them into 1/4 inch dice pieces a lot easier because they're in these nice uniform strips. Now my celery is cooking fine. You can see it. There's nothing bad happening to it. I didn't have to add any water. I can kind of stir it around. I turned the heat down a little bit because I really didn't need it to overcook the celery while I'm getting all the other vegetables in here. So, whoops, I'm dropping things down the side of my cutting board. So how many of you already made your yellow eye beans? Raise your hand if you can figure out a symbol to raise your hand and show me in the comments, because I can glance up and see if anybody is watching, if you cooked your beans and plan to make this soup today. Turns out this is a good day for soup. Where I live, it's not really cold, but it's kind of a dreary, rainy day. So I've got my carrots. I'm going to put half of them in. I don't see anybody responding. I guess nobody's making yellow eye bean soup. I cooked my beans the Rancho Gordo way on the stove top. So I have a YouTube video where I do that, and I'm going to make another YouTube video. I think on Wednesday I'm going to redo the YouTube video of cooking the basic bean cooking method, and I'm going to add another method. I'm going to add baking them in the oven, because I think that we could use that. I've tried that with lentils, and I was really pleased with how the lentils turned out. Okay, so you see all this time I've been cooking these vegetables, and they're cooking fine. I've got it kind of on low heat. Nothing terrible's happening. They're not burning. I didn't add anything yet. At some point I'll add some of my broth from the beans just for a little liquid when I need it, but I don't have to do it right now. I have my leek, and I've cleaned it really well, because with leeks, a lot of times dirt gets trapped inside these little, they have all these layers. So it's really important that you rinse them under cold running water. So cut the leek in half and then rinse it under water. Otherwise you might end up with some dirt. And I'm just going to slice the leek, just in like 1/4 inch pieces. And if you don't have leeks, you can use onions. I think, this time of year, you can't really see me. I think this time of year, leeks are kind of nice because they kind of remind you of spring onions, leeks. So if you can find leeks, get them. And you can use them for other things. Like I have these leeks, and when you get down to the dark green part, you kind of quit because that part is a little tough. I have a couple more leeks, and what I'm going to use those other leeks with is I have a recipe for cauliflower shepherd's pie. So I'm going to make shepherd's pie with some cauliflower topping, and the inside part is made with cabbage and leeks. Okay, my beans are starting to get warm, so I've got my beans over here, and I just wanted to warm them up because we're going to add these beautiful vegetables to our beans, because that's the basis of our soup. It's a yellow bean and vegetable soup. Can you see how green everything is behind me? You see my backdrop is my backyard and the bird feeders. Well, it's spring, and so everything is starting to green up. I just noticed that, and I was able to film using my stove today because the sun's not glaring. A lot of times the sun is coming in and I have to kind of turn to the other side, but today it was pretty nice because the sun isn't so bad. Okay, so we're going to put in garlic. The original recipe from Rancho Gordo, I always change recipes because I can tell by looking at them sometimes. Hi Nancy, hi Sharon, hi Ellen, hi Jenny. I can tell by looking at these recipes that they're going to be not what I like, because this original rustic bean soup recipe called for a whole head of garlic cloves. That's like 10 garlic cloves? I don't know about you, but I like garlic, but I don't like garlic that much. If you do, you go ahead and put in triple the amount of garlic cloves that I'm putting in, but I'm going to put in, I think, 2 really big ones. because I already put 2 or 3 garlic cloves in when I cooked the beans. So I really don't want to put, you know, another dozen garlic cloves in here. All I would taste is garlic. I'm just not that, I love garlic, but I'm not crazy about it like that. So I've got 2 really good sized garlic cloves, and I'm just gonna slice them and then chop them. Put them here with my vegetable mixture, which is starting to smell really great. The vegetables, the leeks, carrots. I've got leeks, carrots, and celery in there. And then I'm gonna put in my garlic. And it doesn't have to be tiny minced. It can just be kind of small chopped. That's fine. You know, we don't mind tasting the garlic. It's not a bad thing to taste garlic, and this garlic is really fresh and good. I know people will say, well, why don't you just put it in a chopper, like a garlic chopper, or garlic press or something? And I don't like to get out a bunch of tools if I don't have to, so I prefer not to use those tools because I don't really mind garlic in its chopped state. Okay, so all I've done is I've had my cast iron enamel Le Creuset skillet here, just cooking my vegetables. They're starting to have a little tiny bit of brown, so their little caramelization is happening, and that's where the flavor comes in. If you want your food to have flavor without using oil, then it's good to do something in the cooking process. That's why I'm not just dumping the raw vegetables into the soup, because I want it to have some flavor. Okay, so we've got our garlic, our leeks, onions, and celery, and we're going to add some tomatoes, and then we'll add some other spices. So I said in my recipe to add a cup of San Marzano tomatoes. So I have a can here, and I'm going to just dump out the tomatoes because I don't want all this tomato sauce in here. I just want a couple of, you know, the equivalent of a cup of tomatoes. And I will save this sauce and I'll use it for something else. So I'm not going to waste it, but you know, I really don't want all of it in my soup. All right, so now that my vegetables have had time to develop a little brown, you know, I can smell the cooking process. They're developing the little, you know, a little bit of brown. So I know they've got the flavor that I want. Now I'm going to add a little bit of liquid. So I have my beans here right next to my vegetables. I've got my pot of beans. And what I can do is I can just take some of my bean liquid. I'm going to turn my pan down. You see how hot my pan was? How the heat my vegetables have been cooking on was nice and strong. It wasn't wimpy. It was on a good, solid heat. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to cover it now. So that's kind of my method, is I get some color on the vegetables, and then I get the nice action started where some browning is taking place. And then once that happens, I add the liquid after a few minutes, and then I cover them. I do that all the time, and that's just my method. And I believe it produces really good flavor. So try that sometime. I see a lot of plant-based people, and in their cooking process, what they end up doing is they will, here's my cup of tomatoes, but now I'm going to chop them up. What I see people doing is they'll take a cold pan and they'll just take their cold skillet and they'll add water to it, and then they'll throw in all their vegetables, and then they'll start cooking. Well, what that does to me is it kind of just boils your vegetables. And they don't really develop any kind of good flavor that way. They're still okay. It's not going to hurt anything, but my goal is always to develop flavor, because, you know, my claim to fame, or my culinary point of view, or whatever, the thing that I stand for, I guess, is I want things to taste really good. Okay, so I'm going to add all these chopped tomatoes. This is my cup of San Marzano tomatoes, that's just because apparently, you know, those tomatoes taste really good. I'll put a little bit of juice in here, but, you know, I have a bunch more tomatoes here that I didn't use. And what I'll do is I'll put them in a container, like this container back here. and I'll put them in my refrigerator and try to use them in the next few days. Because remember, if you're making plant-based food all the time, and you're eating this, 3 meals a day, you're eating beans every day, and you're eating soups and stir fries and baked potatoes, you can find use for tomatoes. And if you couldn't find a use for those tomatoes, then what you could do is just put them in the freezer. The problem with putting a lot of stuff in the freezer is it can get lost in there easily. Like I've had that happen where I've had all these little individual bags of tomatoes or tomato sauce and different things, and then I'll think, oh, I'm going to use this. No problem, I can use this. I'll make something with it. And then you never do, and then you find it in there. Every couple months I'll clean out the freezer and I'll see a bag with a bunch of little things in it like leftover tomatoes, and I think, I should have just used those. So I'm going to really try harder just to use things up faster. Hi Melanie, hi Christine, hi Cindy. I recognize all your names. I know you guys watch me, and I appreciate that. Okay, now we have some rosemary. And the rosemary, I'm going to use very little. This recipe that I've roughly followed calls for 2 tablespoons of fresh rosemary. Well, again, I tend to change recipes a lot because I think less is more for me, because rosemary is really strong. And I don't want the rosemary to overpower my food. So instead of using 2 tablespoons, I'm going to use about a teaspoon. And I can come back and add more. But I know my taste buds, and I'm not a huge fan of rosemary. I just want a hint of rosemary in mine. But if you love rosemary and you think rosemary is great, add a tablespoon, add 2 tablespoons, whatever you like. And what I say to do is taste it and then add more. So what if I added so much rosemary that all I could taste was rosemary? I think I could add a little bit more because I can't even see it. So I'll add the equivalent of 2 teaspoons. But what if I added 2 tablespoons of rosemary and then I tasted it and said, ooh, all I taste is rosemary? Well, I couldn't do anything about it then. I'd be stuck with something that was so strong of rosemary that I wouldn't be able to stand it. So that's why I say, taste as you go. That's another tip that I like to give people is taste your food as you go. Don't just follow recipes. Recipes to me are guidelines, and they're meant to kind of steer you in the direction of how to make things, but they don't necessarily have to be exact, okay? And I'm just stirring all this up. Lastly, I'm going to add some red chilies. And if you could see this, you could see it pretty well. You could see that it's cooking down pretty nicely. Everything is softening up, but by chopping those tomatoes, I was able to get them to cook down a lot faster. If I had left the tomatoes whole, then it would take a long time for them to cook down. So I'm going to add some red chili flakes. The original New York Times recipe says to use 1.5 teaspoons of red chili flakes. Well, again, I'm going to use more like 1/2 teaspoon because red chili flakes are kind of strong, okay? So I don't really want my soup to be so strong of red chili flakes that people will eat it and go, oh, this soup is too hot and spicy. And I'm not the only one eating this. Other people besides me will be eating it. And my last ingredient that I'm going to add after the soup is done is parsley. So just to show you, I had some Italian parsley that I bought. I used to grow it during the spring and summer. Oops, one fell in. And I will grow it again this year. But I don't have any right now because everything froze and died. So sadly, I have nothing in my garden, but I have a few things that survived. I have some oregano and some, you can see, if you can see behind me. If you look right behind me, that's my herb garden where it's kind of curved. And just coming up, the tarragon is coming back, the oregano is coming back. The strawberries are coming back. My raspberries are coming back. And some of the herbs, some, what do you call them? Chives are coming back, garlic chives. So I've got some stuff coming back. But a lot of it like the thyme died, and that never happens. Usually the thyme is always there. All right, so this is pretty much ready. It wasn't intended to be that long, but with the parsley, what I did was I grabbed some parsley and washed it, and then I dried it really well and put it in a paper towel, because if your parsley is wet, it doesn't cut very well, and so we have to take it off the stems. We don't want the parsley stems in the garnish, so we take the stems out and just pile it up, and then I blot it again because I want it to be dry. So I'm going to blot it again. And I wanted to tell you the parsley stems I did use when I cooked my Rancho Gordo beans this morning. I used parsley stems in my little sachet. So this was just full of parsley stems. And that provides a little extra flavor in the cooking process. So you can get these little sachet bags, stirring this a little bit longer. I want this vegetable mixture to cook down before I put it back with the beans. In fact, this instruction said about 3 to 4 minutes, so we're almost done cooking it down. So this, these sachets, spice bags they're called, they're reusable, and they have a little string on them, and so you can put things in here like bay leaves, rosemary, sage, thyme, and put it in your soup pot, and that way when you want to fish stuff out of your beans or your soup, it's in a little bag, and you don't have to, because you don't want somebody to eat a bay leaf because they're sharp edges and it's an unpleasant feeling to eat a bay leaf. So you kind of want to get bay leaves out, or thyme stems, or stems of anything can be really hard and they're not pleasant if you bite into them. So I'm going to move my pan over here, get a pot holder out. So I'm going to move my bean pot back here. So I've had it kind of warming up. And so now the yellow eye beans are nice and warm. They're kind of getting a little soft. So yellow eye beans, they don't take that long to cook. So I think they were done in under an hour, which is very little time compared to lots of the beans I cook. You know, it's a good thing that I'm a weightlifter, because this skillet is heavy. But you know what? I go to the gym twice a week, so my arms are really strong. And it's a good thing, because that was kind of hard. If you can't lift your skillet, just get some help. You know, use 2 hands, or you know, get everything out with a tool and then put it in. So what I did was I put all those ingredients, the leeks, the carrots, the celery, the rosemary, and what else was in there? The tomatoes. I added them to the beans, okay? The beans that I cooked earlier today, the Rancho Gordo way, which was, and I'll go over it here in a second. I have a YouTube video which I'll post the link to. Let's see if there's any questions coming up. I see a bunch of people watching, but no questions. I'm going to add a little freshly ground pepper. And I'm not going to add any salt, because we don't really need to. We can add, if you want to add salt, what you can do is you can add your salt when you get ready to eat it. And I always have, what I like to buy are these Alessi sea salt and pepper. I buy them in the grocery store in a set. And the sea salt is really good tasting. Oh, there's a squirrel running across the patio. And the black pepper's freshly ground. It tastes so good like that. So I'm going to taste the soup, see what it tastes like. Yeah, I can taste the rosemary, and it's not overpowering, but I can taste it. It's perfect for me. I use 2 teaspoons. What I can also taste is the tomato, and it tastes really good. Everything is very well balanced. So in my recipe version of this, I cut way back on the garlic and the rosemary, but I still have it in there, but you can make it however you want it. So let me talk a little bit about, so all we have to do now is we're just gonna simmer this. We only need to simmer it for about 10 minutes. That was it. So this is a really quick recipe once you made the beans. But you see how much bean broth I have in here. I have a lot of bean broth because I cooked my beans earlier today, a whole pound of beans. And the Rancho Gordo cooking method for beans is just to soak the beans for 4 to 6 hours, which I did. I got up this morning and I soaked the whole bag of yellow eye beans. I can't find the bag now, here it is. The whole bag is a pound. It's about 3 cups, a little over 2 cups of dried beans. I soaked them in a bowl, uncovered, on the kitchen counter for about, I think it was 4 hours. That was it. And then I put them in this very pot. This is a 4.5 quart Le Creuset cast iron enamel pot. I put them in here, covered them with lots of water, like the water was almost up to the top of the pot. Probably 3.5 quarts of water I put in here, and it's a 4.5 quart pot. So up to about there, all I had left was that much at the top that didn't have water. Brought it to a boil, let these boil for a good 15 minutes. And while they were boiling, then I went over to a skillet like this one, and then I took about 1/4 of a big onion, a celery rib, and a carrot, and 2 cloves of garlic, cut them up, sauteed them in my skillet just like I did these vegetables. And I added those sauteed vegetables to the pot of beans, let it boil for about 15 minutes, and then I reduced it to simmer. And within 1 hour, these yellow eye beans were done. They did not take that long. They were done in probably under an hour. They were really soft, and then I turned it off. I cooked them covered, but I always leave a little bit of an opening, so there's a little bit of a vent while they're covered. But the last 15 minutes, I had the lid off and let the bean liquid reduce a little bit. I didn't add any more, I just let it reduce because I had put in a lot to begin with. And then I added a teaspoon of salt the last 15 minutes. You don't have to add salt to your beans, but I do like a little salt in my beans. So I did add a teaspoon of salt to the beans because I think that makes them taste really good. And so then my beans, I just let them sit in the liquid until I started my video at 2 o'clock. Also, the other thing I did a little differently this time is I added the parsley stems when I was cooking the beans, and I took them out when they were done. So, are there other ways you can cook yellow eye beans? Yes. I don't really go into all the different ways. We could use, slow cookers and crock pots, and we could use instant pots and everything, but I'm trying to kind of go with the Rancho Gordo recommendation, which is to cook them on the stove top because they taste better. They don't require a lot of the intensive time of a instant pot. It's easy to overcook them and then they kind of fall apart. So you don't need to cook them in the instant pot. I'm just chopping up this parsley because I'm going to put it on here in a second. You can, this is one of those things where you kind of have to monitor it when it's on the stove top. So I understand there are people that don't really have the time. I'm going to turn this off because I can tell it's cooked long enough. There are people that don't have the time to mess with stovetop cooking. So all I can tell you is you can mess around with the Instant Pot and crock pot, but my instructions are always going to be stovetop, or I am going to add a component to start baking the beans in the oven because I had some really good success with making lentils in the oven. I see Terry Malnar is on. Terry's always making lots of good beans, so I'm sure she'll make this one. But here is the finished pot of bean soup. It's thickening up, but the beans, you can still tell the beans are whole beans. And I'm going to ladle them into my bean bowl here, my soup bowl. And I can see the leeks, I can see little bits of tomato. And by using our own bean broth, the Rancho Gordo beans, they cook in such a way that the bean broth is really delicious, okay? I'm putting my fresh parsley on top. And so, the bean broth is kind of part of the whole experience, that the flavors developed by the bean broth of Rancho Gordo beans or any good heirloom bean makes the dish. So we use the bean broth that was developed in cooking. And remember, when we were cooking the beans, we had onions and celery and garlic and parsley stems. And so and carrots. So we had all these good aromatics the hour that we were cooking the beans, and that flavors the bean broth. So at the end, we have this really rich bean broth that then flavors our soup. And then we added these different vegetables, the leek and more carrots and celery and garlic, and then rosemary and tomatoes to form this beautiful bean soup. And how we serve it is we're gonna serve it with some toasted bread. And if you wanted to, I got some, I'll turn that heat on. What we could do is we could serve it with our bread and then dunk the bread into the soup. And this bread is really crunchy. I toasted it. You can't really tell, but it's toasted. So it's really crunchy bread, and we're dipping it in the soup, and that, you know, kind of gives the bread some flavor. Since we don't use butter, we can, you know, have our bread be a vehicle. So what kind of bread is this? Let's see so you can see this. I bought a loaf of 10-grain bread at the grocery store. I sliced it up before class. But it was, ooh, that hot, really red chili. It's just one of those artisan bread loaves in the bakery of a grocery store, and it's 10 grain. It doesn't have any added oil. It just is, you know, lots of whole grains, no white flour. And it tastes pretty good. It's not as good as some bread, but, you know, it's good enough to have with soup. And then, so this made a lot of soup. You can tell this makes about 6 to 8 servings. I think it's more like 8 servings of this bean soup, this rustic yellow eye bean soup. So what are we going to do when we have all this soup left over? So what, you know, how I store my soup in the freezer, people are always asking me how I keep stuff in the freezer. They're fascinated by it. So I'll show you an example. So for my freezer, I would put, and I'll kind of show you what, to me, what a serving is. This bowl has servings on the side. It's a 2.5 cup bowl, but I never fill it up because that would be way too much. I put more like a little bit over a cup because my appetite is about 1.25 cups of soup. So here's, you know, I fill it up about that full. And, you know, when you put stuff in the freezer, it tends to expand a little bit. Oh, somebody's sending me stars. I appreciate it. Whoever sent stars, thank you so much. I see in the bottom it said I've received 550 stars. That's great. Thank you, guys. Stars are worth a penny a piece, and Facebook sends me the money every month. Okay, so that's how much bean soup I put in my container, and then I cover it with the lid. And my method for labeling it is to put a little Post-it note on there that says bean soup. This will say yellow eye bean soup on the little Post-it note. And then, you know, I'll have a bunch of these because this made a lot. But that's good because how I eat this is I'm not usually very hungry at lunchtime because I eat a huge breakfast. You know, I have a smoothie and greens and oatmeal and fruit. So, and my breakfast is after I walk 5 miles. So my breakfast is eaten about 9:30. So, you know, if you count the hours at the typical lunchtime, I'm not hungry at all. But I start getting hungry around this time of day, 2 o'clock. Well, because I don't want to eat a huge amount of food at 2 o'clock. If I'm going to eat dinner, I eat dinner about 7. So I'm always thinking, what can I eat that's not very heavy? Well, I really enjoy having a bowl of soup because it has beans and vegetables and maybe a little bit of salad on the side. Maybe not. Maybe I'll have it with a piece of bread, or I could have this with rice, or I could have it with quinoa, or I could have it with any grain that I choose, farro, barley. I could take some frozen grain that I have in my freezer. I make a lot of grains and freeze them. I could get a little 1/2 cup portion of a grain out of my freezer and then heat it up and add it to my soup. And then I have like a grain and bean soup, so I could change it up. So that's what I would do this, or do with this. I could have a piece of my plant-based no oil cornbread with this. But this is a meal. This bean soup is a good meal. It's got plenty of stuff in it. We could take what we had in the freezer and get one of these out of the freezer, defrost it. I usually get it out when I know I'm going to have this for lunch. I get it out in the morning after breakfast. And then by the lunchtime, it's kind of partially defrosted. Then I put it in a pan, or I heat it in the microwave, whatever I feel like doing. Usually I put it in another pan or a bowl before I reheat it. I don't like to put plastic in the microwave. But what I could do with it is I could put this in a small pan on the stove, and I could add some cabbage, broccoli, Brussels sprouts, some kind of cruciferous vegetable to it. I always have cabbage around, so I could add, you know, a handful of cabbage to this, and then I could also add my greens to it because I eat a lot of greens. So I would probably do that. I would take my greens I cook every morning or every other morning and just chop up some greens and throw the greens in. Then I would have my beans, greens, I could put cabbage in it, and I would have my whole bunch of my daily dozen in my lunchtime soup. So this pot of soup is a really good thing to make to have leftovers. And for example, tonight I told my husband that for dinner we were having yellow eye bean soup, and he likes yellow eye beans. He said, oh, I like those beans. He doesn't like a lot of the beans I make, but he likes these. And so he'll eat a big bowl of the yellow eye bean soup, and he'll eat, knowing him, he'll eat a couple pieces of this 10-grain bread. He'll put butter on his. He doesn't follow my way of eating, but you know, he'll eat his bread and beans, and then I'll have a bunch left. And so what I'll usually do is I'll make a couple of these this size and put them in the refrigerator, because over the next 3 or 4 days, and it's good for about 4 days. To me, after 4 days, I don't want it in the refrigerator. For about 4 days, I'll have a couple of these in the refrigerator for me. So I might eat this for 1 more meal or 2 more meals, lunches usually. And then the rest of it, I will immediately, as soon as it cools, be sure and cool food before you put it in the freezer. I'll put it in my little containers and I'll stack them up in my freezer. I have several different soups going in there now. I have red lentil soup, cauliflower soup. So what that gives me is that gives me a supply of things I can eat every day in a variety, because I could eat the yellow eye bean soup, I could have red lentil soup, I could have creamy cauliflower soup, I have hidatsa red chili. So right now I've got about 5 different soups, maybe more that I don't even know about, but I know at least I have those. So I never have to think about what are you going to eat for your meal, because I always have plenty. And I could take these with me. Like if I had to leave the house, I worked outside the home, like some of you have to take stuff with you, I could easily grab one of these out of the freezer, take it with me, you know, grab a piece of frozen cornbread, take that with me, you know, throw some lettuce in a bowl and take that with me. So it's not hard to follow this way of eating, but what is important is that you learn to make things that taste really good. Because this soup, you know, it's a very simple soup, but it tastes delicious. It has all this flavor in it. It has fresh herbs. It has aromatics from all the vegetables. And if you sit down and eat this, you'll really enjoy it. Well, to me, that's how I've been able to follow this whole food plant-based way of eating, because my food tastes good to me. In contrast, if I were to go to the pantry and grab a can of beans and throw a can of beans in a pot, what you look at, Mochi? Throw a can of beans in a pot with some tomatoes and vegetables and tried to cook it up, it would taste like canned beans with tomatoes and vegetables. It would not taste that great. It would be okay, but early on when I started eating this way, 3.5 years ago, almost 4 years ago this year, I watched some videos of people that made really easy whole food plant-based meals in minutes, and it all involved taking all these various cans of food and dumping them together in a pot and eating them with like packaged rice, boil in the bag rice or something. And so I tried it. I thought, oh, well, that looks so easy. I could eat like that. I could make all that food. So I went and bought the canned stuff and threw it all in a pot and sat down to eat it. And I'm eating it going, oh, this is awful. This is so bland. This has no taste. This is terrible. Not just not good, but terrible. So I thought, I can't do this. I can't eat plant-based because the food tastes bad to me. Not just not good, it just didn't taste, it tasted bad. So over the years, 3.5 years, almost 4 years later, my eating this kind of food has evolved to the point where my food tastes great to me. And that's what's important to me. I like it. I like, you know, that's why I do Bean of the Week. Because every Monday I get excited about making a pot of some kind of delicious bean to eat for the next few days and to put in my freezer. So I always have a stock of things. So I'm just telling you that make this soup. It is absolutely delicious. It has the most, you know, aromatic, delicious, herby taste from the rosemary, but don't use too much rosemary. And not lots of vegetables. So everything about this yellow eye bean, rustic yellow eye bean soup is fantastic. I hope you make it, post pictures of it, and we'll just keep doing these Bean of the Week demos. And I have lots of recipes that I'm excited about sharing. And so I'll be doing another one next Monday. So thanks for watching. I don't see any questions on here. See a bunch of people watching. Hi, Ellen. Hi, Diane. Thank you guys for watching the Bean of the Week. I have it every Monday at 2 o'clock. I have been posting Facebook live events so that you can see it's coming up. And then there's a little tab where you can hit reminder. So I guess it reminds you that the live is going to start. So, hi, Evelyn. So, you know, if you want to be reminded of these Facebook live videos, hit the reminder. And also I've been putting them on YouTube the next day. So that way this video will be on YouTube in case you want to go back later and say, what was that yellow eye bean soup that she made? And so now I'm putting them on YouTube because it's much easier to find stuff on YouTube than it is to find it on Facebook. Facebook kind of makes it hard to find stuff. Hi, Wendy. So that was it for our delicious Bean of the Week, which was the yellow eye bean soup. And I will go into my study right now and post the recipe, all the details of what we made. And I will enjoy my bowl of soup while I'm in there. Might have to have this twice today. I usually don't do that, but if it's good, why not? So thank you all. And I do have a class coming up on April the 10th. And I've put the event on Facebook now. It's called Plant-Based Brunch Dishes. And one thing I discovered in making the dishes for the class is I figured out how to make a frittata omelet type of a thing with my secret ingredients, and it tastes like a real, well, it doesn't taste like egg exactly, but it tastes good. It tastes better than anything I've ever had. And I've made many attempts to make something that looks like a frittata or an omelet, and they never taste good, but this one tastes really good. So that's going to be in the brunch class. I'm going to be making some good breakfast tacos, different from ones I made before. We're going to have a pancake bar. So I'm going to show how to make all kinds of pancakes with different toppings so that if you have someone coming over, you know, grandkids, family, brunch, you can set up a little pancake bar, which is a fun thing to do. People can make their own pancakes, or you can make them and they can put different things on them. So we'll do that. And then I'm making a new pumpkin bread with a miso glaze. And that's gonna have a little bit different flavor profile, but nice for brunch because we wanna have some special plant-based treat at our brunch. So it'll be this good pumpkin bread. So sign up for the brunch class. You can sign up in Facebook events. Just look for it. It has a link. You can get your ticket there, or you can go to PayPal the way a lot of people do and just purchase the class. So whatever you want to do. So I hope you sign up for the class. And thanks again for watching this. I'll be back on Friday on the Friday recap, where I go on and talk about the people following the 21-day challenge. And then on Wednesday, every Wednesday, I post a new YouTube video. So this week's YouTube video is going to be how to make the basic Rancho Gordo beans, both on the stovetop and baked. So I wanted to get a really good recipe on YouTube. The one that's on there now, I was pretty new at YouTube, and so I didn't really know how to edit the video clips. So I have it ending when the beans start cooking. There's no finish, like you don't get to see them after they're done. And it's kind of lacking. It's kind of like, it's incomplete. So I'm gonna redo it. And the funny thing is, people at Rancho Gordo have sent people to my YouTube video on how to cook Rancho Gordo beans. which surprised me when I found out. But, you know, they were sending people, somebody commented and they said, Rancho Gordo said I had so many questions, so they sent me to your YouTube video on how to cook Rancho Gordo beans. So they're watching me apparently, so I better get a good video on there and make it to where people really want to watch it. So I'm going to sign off and I'll see if there's any activity. Oh, you know, my boys here, they're camouflaged, but they're both just laying on the floor. They haven't even stirred. I guess the smell of the bean soup wasn't enough to wake them up, but they're here. And if I were to sit down and start eating it, they would appear. They would see me. They would hear me eating. So thank you all for watching, and I hope you make the rustic yellow eye bean soup. I think you'll really be pleased with it. Bye-bye.